You find yourself standing in a brightly lit room, inside a tower devoid of any uniquely identifying features. Your journey here was a relatively uneventful one. Other than meeting an interesting person who'd regaled you with tales of their newly found deity, you'd not encountered anything particularly out of the ordinary. Finding this tower wasn't difficult thanks to the trusty map in your pocket, and gaining entry had actually proved far easier than you might have expected. Scanning the room at first, nothing really catches your eye. And then in your peripheral vision, you spot movement. You spin to see what might be there, and that's when you catch sight of the challenge that lays ahead of you. "Good morning," the vaguely humanoid figure speaks. "Glad to see you're here. I'm the project manager. Let's get started." So, first of all, I love Dungeons & Dragons. I've played tabletop games for years, not just Dungeons & Dragons. I've played many other rule systems. I've played as a dungeon master. I've played as a player. I've been an observer. I've been an assistant in games where new players are on board and I'm helping them sort of navigate their way through the rules. I'm going to generalize a lot of things in this talk, and I'm going to simplify a lot of things. So if you're an experienced player and you're kind of there thinking, well, what you've described is more of what a sorcerer might do than a wizard, that's cool, but it doesn't matter for the purposes of this talk. This talk is designed to be approachable by people both new to Dungeons & Dragons and experienced players. So I need to bring everyone up to a similar kind of baseline so that we can work our way through the talk. So this is a game. Dungeons & Dragons is different in every which way you can imagine. One person's game is different to another. So just because my game is different to yours does not mean that my game is right and your game is wrong. My fun being different doesn't make your fun wrong, and vice versa. So let's put some stats to me as a person. In Dungeons & Dragons, we have physical and mental attributes that are how we perform and how we value our sort of skill points within a world. So my name's Matt, I'm 33. I'm a nerd class player in the world of real life. I like Jaffa cakes, I dislike beetroot. I'm not particularly strong. I did ask my friends to put these numbers against me to sort of value my statistics. In D&D, kind of between 8 and 8 and a 10 is considered average. I thought my constitution would be higher because, you know, a lot of sessions at the pub with friends. But then my fiance reminded them that on multiple years I've caught colds in the middle of July in a heat wave. So maybe I'm not as strong as, you know, in constitution as I might have thought. I'm not particularly wise. I think I'm quite intelligent and I'm somewhat charismatic. So our physical attributes are our strength, our constitution, and our dexterity, how strong we are, our ability to keep going, and how agile we are. Wisdom, intelligence, and charisma are our mental statistics. Intelligence being, you know, the smarts, wisdom being the kind of common sense, if you like, and charisma being your ability to charm and interact with people. This here is my beloved wizard, Mordecai Solomon. He's 80 years old. He likes books and he dislikes people. He's not very strong. Again, doesn't have a high constitution. He's very, very intelligent, though. On a D&D level, we don't have any specific attributes that are directly related to software development. Intelligence, wisdom, maybe charisma. But we're going to look at a different set of attributes. We're going to consider a technical set of attributes, testing algorithms and databases, for example, and complementary attributes such as communication skills, empathy, and creativity and creative thinking. But as a member of a software team, you'll have all of these skills in different forms and in different values amongst that team of people. So, if anyone who hasn't played Dungeons & Dragons before, a friend of mine once really summed up the premise of the game really nicely. We were talking amongst some friends about Dungeons & Dragons, and if someone had never played before, and they said, you know, what is this you're talking about? What is Dungeons & Dragons? And they put it down to, we all roll dice to see if we can do stuff whilst playing make-believe, which at first glance doesn't sound like it has anything to do with software development. However, in Dungeons & Dragons, each time you want to do something, you roll a dice, and you might add some numbers onto that dice depending on how good you are at doing that particular thing. So while it comes down to a roll of the dice and a little bit of fate, you can improve your odds and your chances of succeeding by your skills and your expertise. You usually play with a group of friends. And a dungeon master is the person who helps lead you through that world. Now, when I sort of started formulating this talk took a couple of years to kind of formulate in my head, because I was, for the longest time, thinking there's parallels here, but I can't quite put the pieces together. So I literally started with just this phrase. I was like, what about this is relatable? And then it kind of hit me that in Dungeons and Dragons, we're in a dungeon fighting a dragon, potentially. So ultimately, we're in an environment with a problem to solve. Dragons might be an adversarial foe, but it's just a problem to solve and a problem to overcome in whatever way we choose to approach it. And as software engineers, we're doing the exact same thing. We work within a team, within a company, within a project, and our problems to solve are the features that we're building, or the bug that keeps coming up, or the users finding ways around security measures we've put in. So in this world, the Dungeon Master is the world builder. They set the challenges and steer the story in a sort of certain direction, and they make sure that what's in front of the party is engaging and interesting and challenging. They don't control the players. They don't tell the players what to do. Ultimately, they're just helping the party tell their story. And in project management and software development, this is what I would like a project manager to be, someone who helps steer the direction, helps sort of guide the team along the right path, but doesn't force them down any particular route, doesn't force them to do what they deem is necessary. You don't tell people what to do. You hire them because they're smart and they're intelligent and they've got skills that you need and you value, and you let them work in partnership with you to build the feature, to tell the story, just like an ideal dungeon master should. Now, ultimately, that means that they might go in directions that you're not necessarily explicitly planning, but there could be value in that. So whilst part of being a dungeon master is sort of improvising and being able to think on the fly, being a project manager is being able to be agile and think about, actually, well, we could go in that direction. That makes sense. And switching priorities based on what the team as a whole, including yourself, has decided. So, our story begins with you. In Dungeons & Dragons, there's attributes, as I've mentioned, which is how good they are on specific tasks with physical and mental sort of attributes. Each player has different priorities and different values, and they value those things in different ways. But we also have alignments. In Dungeons & Dragons, an alignment is a sort of categorization of your ethical and your moral perspective, which in a lot of ways directly translates into the real world. Most versions of the game have law versus chaos and good versus evil. They're a bit more sort of black and white than the nuanced world that we live in. But ultimately it boils down to, do you follow tradition and sacrifice yourself for others, but you're perhaps closed-minded to new ways of doing things because you don't like change? Or do you adapt and act flexibly and change the way that you do things, but you're maybe a little bit reckless because you're not always considering the side effects of what it is you're doing? But when you have these alignments, it's like a lot of things in life, it's good to have a balance. If everyone in the team is just agreeing with that one person that's in charge, saying, that's the route we're going to go down, if everyone's just agreeing with them, the software and the things that you're building, they might not be as good as they can be. And similarly, if everyone is just constantly disagreeing all the time, it's going to be chaos and nothing's ever going to get done. So you need people to be able to speak up and say, actually, that's a different way of doing things. We should think about this different way of doing things, and sort of prompt those discussions, but without just the whole thing devolving into chaos because everyone thinks they've got the best idea. Now, I would consider my alignment to be neutral good, probably both in most of the characters I play, sometimes a bit chaotic, but in real life, if you ask my boss, he might say I'm chaotic rather than neutral, but that's his perspective. I'm not always the person that agrees with everyone. So, wizards exist both in Dungeons & Dragons and in software development. The magical, mystical, all-powerful code wizard that seeks knowledge, craves new things to learn, and wants to gain all new skills they can within their area of expertise. They're highly intelligent, masters of strange and mystical powers, able to understand languages and symbols that no one else can even comprehend. Both in Dungeons & Dragons and the real world, that can have benefits and drawbacks. Wizards are great with algorithms. They know them inside and out. They cast fireballs in Dungeons & Dragons, and they tackle that weird logic loop that's 4,000 lines deep in a code marked with a comment of tread carefully, here be dragons. They sit alone with their books and their knowledge, and they hammer away at their keyboard casting software spells to solve all the problems that might come at them. They're great, right? But like in Dungeons and Dragons, code wizards often put all of their eggs into one basket. They know one particular skill very, very, very well, but they seem powerful. But reality is that they're not a well-rounded person and a well-rounded developer. They're not very good at the testing side of things. They're not good with communication. They don't have empathy. Now, I would argue that everyone should have points in empathy. It's the biggest skill that's lacking in our industry. So, if one wizard is great, more is surely better. A man walks into a large room. He's been sent here to seek out a number of other people for a task of great importance. He heads to the bar and buys a drink. As he turns, the first person he sees is the person he's meant to meet. He strolls over to the low-lit table in the corner, slams his drink down on the table. "Greetings," he says. "I'm Mordecai Solomon. I'm a senior software engineer, and I might be 80, but I'm as good as they come. I'm agile and I'm fragile." The lady at the table sighs. "Oh, so you're who they sent. Typical. An old man who's as frail as he is annoying. Well, I guess if you're who they sent, it's better than nothing. I'm Makaria, senior software engineer." Suddenly a third and fourth voice pop up. "Ebenezer von Helmont, senior software engineer." And then they look around and can't hear that fourth voice, see that fourth voice. They scroll down and see a gnome standing before them in robes and sparkling jewels. "Hey, I'm down here. Care is the name. Backend software is my game." So in this world, we now have our party of wizards. Everyone wants to be the wizard. Everyone wants to be the person who saves the day. They want to have all the tricks. They want to be the magical spell code slinger that fixes all the problems and the hero in the story. Each one has the best ideas and each one knows exactly what they're doing. Each one is the best on the team. Or so they think. As they stand in the bar, the vaguely humanoid figure reappears in the doorway. "Hello, team. The client has asked us to venture forth to the Castle of Credit Reporting and retrieve the Crystal of Financial Viability. This is a task of great importance, and a reward of bowling and jam-filled nuts of dough awaits you at the end of your quest." Immediately, all four wizards look very excited, and they all exclaim the same thing. "I know what I'm doing." Mordecai cries out, "We can use the path of the 31 scrums to reach the castle." Makaria chimes in, "Yeah, but I have this map that clearly shows the caverns of Kubernetes are the way in which we need to go." Carrie immediately runs off shouting, "I'll seek out Master Azure so we can use the magical construct of machine learning to aid us in our journey." Ebenezer sits quiet for a second before finally turning to his computer and hammering away on his keyboard. He turns back around a little while later and says, "I've done it. Once again, I've saved the day with my wonderfully magical code. We don't even need to go to the castle. This problem is already solved." That team of wizards has done what we see so often in software development. An imbalance of skills and everyone thinking that they know what they're doing. No requirements gathering, no clear direction, no communication, each person working for their own purpose and their own interpretation of what the brief is. There's no shared experience here. There's no team. It's just four individual wizards who all think they know what they're doing because they've been given the same task. They run off frantically to solve the problem, and they don't consider anyone else. They have their books, they're super smart, they're code wizards, they know this, so what's the problem? There's no planning, there's no thinking, there's a just do it attitude, which while it can have its place sometimes, mostly it's just a recipe for disaster. We'll just get started, we can plan later, often leads to do first, plan never. Because hey, if there's no plan, then there's no plan that we can't be off plan, right? So we have a team of wizards, a lopsided team of know-it-alls. And a balanced party in Dungeons & Dragons is a mix of different types of character, of alignment, of background, of skill, of expertise. A cleric, a fighter, a warrior, a wizard, a rogue, a hunter, a druid. All of these people bring different skills to the party. And the same with software development. These mixed skill teams allow you to be able to cover a lot more areas. You're not always trying to kill dragons in the dungeon. You're not always revolutionizing the world with new features. You're sneaking through alleys in a city, or you're hunting down a bug that no one's been able to solve for the past 2 years. You're disarming traps as you track a bandit through a forest, or you're fending off distractions on meetings and email invites, and that guy Steve who keeps sending you cat gifs, which they're really cute, but they don't help with your work that you're doing. You're negotiating that lower price of the magic wand you want to buy, or you're negotiating with teams outside of you who are trying to demand things and ask for more requirements and put pressure on you to deliver features that they want when you've got your own backlog and priorities. A balanced party leads to more possibilities. You don't always have to take the same approach to everything because you've got different ways of thinking. You might have someone who's good with communications. You still have someone who's good with the back end and the algorithm side of things. You've got someone who's got a really creative way of thinking, and then someone who's very empathetic, though, again, I would argue that everyone should have that particular skill. But each person has a different ability, and they're not always using that specific ability all the time, but it helps with the way in which the team forms together. You're problem solvers as a developer. You are here to solve a problem, and code might just be how you do that. Different skills, different backgrounds, different minds, different interests, different people all lend themselves to more creative ways to solve a problem. So we have our new, more balanced party. A few minutes later, after silently disappearing from the doorway, the project manager reappears in a puff of smoke next to you. Party, our clients have heard of this amazing new technology. All the other adventuring parties are using it, and it's crucial that we have to use this new technology. We believe that using it, we will beat our competition and we will win this race. So it's a requirement that you take this, the mighty block of chain, and use it to complete your quest. The project manager disappears in a puff of smoke. Behind them stands a 5-foot block of stone with a large metal chain wrapped around it. The team sighs, realizing that this unexpected new requirement is going to slow them down in their quest. How are we going to carry this? Says the wizard. The rogue pops up. It's too big. Even if we all tried to carry this, we're not strong enough. I just can't see a reason why we'd need to complete this to go and retrieve the crystal. Forget it, the fighter says. I know how to talk to these people. We don't need it. We've been given a task, and that's the task we're going to do. This requirement doesn't aid us. Don't worry. I will talk through this with the client, and I will make sure that they know this is not relevant. You've been given a requirement by your task giver. In Dungeons & Dragons, when someone comes up to you with this sort of thing and you've got conflict, so often it's, I'm going to draw my sword. I'm going to fight this person. And that might be your instinct to do in the software world, not with an actual sword. I would recommend against that. But to fight your side and to sort of, fight back with hostility. I wouldn't say it's actually fighting your side. I would say it's more defending your side. It's explaining to them why your perspective is the way it is, why you've got these reasons why it doesn't work. Don't always go out fighting. You need to communicate and explain the situation. Now, having someone that's good at dealing with those interactions, that's the person that you probably want doing this sort of thing. Because often client requirements of you have to do it this way aren't because you have to do it that way. They just think that that's the way to be successful because they've got an idea of how it should be built. You're the experts here. So if you say that's how it should be built, go for it. That's the way to do it. That's your decision that you've made. But being told to use a specific piece of technology doesn't always work out. More often than not, it causes more issues than it solves. For the people outside the team, they need to trust the team. Don't try and control them. Because when you trust the team and you allow them to get on with it and you give them that autonomy, you don't worry about controlling everything. You trust that they're going to get the job done for you. You set out on your journey, and after a short while, everything is going well. Along the way, you've met a few folks along the path that you're on, and you've camped out and kept monitor that anything might seek to ambush you in the night. Each time a team is formed, I've found myself that they do go through some form of Tuckman stages of group development. Now, this is not a scientifically sort of proven thing. There's been studies that have tried to verify it and they can't, and some studies that have tried to disprove it and they seem to be able to do that. Anecdotally, I find that the teams that I've been in and the teams that I've been a part of and leader of have all gone through this in some form or another, where the team starts forming and they're an independently behaving team of people. They're motivated, but they're uninformed of issues. and the objectives of the team. They're sort of more for themselves. And then they reach the storming phase where they're all loudly voiced opinions. There's disputes. There's people trying to sort of form the dominant position in the group and get their opinion in because it matters more than someone else's. There's the norming stage where they start realizing that none of that matters and they're a team of people and it's not an individual thing. And they start moving towards harmonious working practices and agreements on the rules and how things might work within the team. And then they hit the performing stage where they're motivated, they're knowledgeable, they're competent, they're autonomous, and they all have aligned goals and values. You wake up one morning, the sun already bright in the sky, and you hear a voice excitedly say, "Hey folks, mind if I join you?" You see an elven figure, green robe and flowers in their hair. It would appear you've come across a druid who sought to join you on your quest. Now, it's going to happen both in Dungeons & Dragons and in real life. You're going to have someone new join your team or even someone leave your team. It's unfortunate, but that's the world. Now, it'll upset your team balance. Everyone who's found their role and their position within the team and their sort of individual skill set to sort of work towards a group dynamic now realizes there's another person there, and it's going to shift that balance. When you have someone join your team or someone leave your team, you don't have a changed team. You have a new team. Teams are immutable. So this druid joins us and they bring a new set of skills with them. They bring a set of skills in testing that we didn't have before. And now everyone kind of goes, well, I was doing a little bit of that before, but now I don't have to necessarily worry about it as much. Or maybe they worry about it more, or they improve their skills in that area because they've got someone to mentor and teach them. But once this person joins the team, we go through this stage again. They go back through the forming stage. They go back through the storming stage, maybe less so. They go back to the norming stage before they hit the performing stage again, once everyone refines their balance within this new team. You've made great progress on your journey. You're nearing the castle, and as you see the castle in the distance, the fighter turns around to talk to the team. Right, we can see the castle in the distance, just at the top of that ridge. Rogue, can you scout ahead and see if you can find that? Where's the rogue gone? And you realize that your rogue is nowhere to be seen. You're going to have to backtrack and see if you can find the spot where they disappeared. Now, I've seen this happen in discussions, in planning sessions, in lengthy architecture whiteboarding sessions about how we're going to solve a problem. You end up talking for hours upon hours upon hours, and then only at the end of it do you realize that half the people there have switched off and weren't listening after the first 30 minutes. Our rogue could have disappeared anywhere along this path. We don't know where they are because we haven't checked in with them. And we can't just make a straight journey from where we are to where the rogue is because we don't know what they've gone through, and that path between us and them is filled with dragons. We don't know what's there, so we just have to expect that there's something bad. In reality, the way to get back to knowing where that rogue disappeared from and bringing them back on board and discussing it with them is to backtrack. But if you check in at regular intervals whilst you're having these conversations, then you don't have to backtrack as far and people don't spend as long and not as much time is wasted. Every half an hour or so, just check in to make sure that the things that have been covered have been taken in, because people will nod along and smile and make it look like they're paying attention, but they're not taking anything in because in reality they've switched off. They're thinking about what they're going to be doing in their Dungeons & Dragons game later on that night because the discussion they're having is not engaging for them. Make sure that people are taking in the information that you're going through in these sessions. And I would also say keeping the sessions shorter rather than longer is going to be helpful. I've seen this happen especially with newer members of a team. People that are just sort of willing to please and they kind of nod along like they know what's going on because they want to give a good impression to a team. I've seen it happen with juniors and seniors and apprentices and mid-levels and architects. Everyone at some point will switch off in a discussion because either it doesn't interest them or they're not quite following, but they don't want to speak up and say that. So don't make them speak up and say, I don't know what I'm doing. Address the group and say, right, we've all, this is the things we've been talking about. Has anyone got any questions? That then means it's more of an open place to do it rather than them having to single themselves out. You emerge from the forest of wandering data leaks. You come across a fast-running river that wasn't on your map. There's no crossing in sight, and the castle that you need to reach is on the other side. You have 4 options in crossing this river. You could maybe try and use some rope to cross. You could build a bridge. You could let the wizard cast fly on the party, and that one person saves the day, and you all sail across. Or you can try and find another way around. Do you write that quick script that fixes the issue just once, like using a rope would be? With a bridge, it's slow, it needs lots of materials, but it's reusable for years to come. If you're going to be reusing this particular thing years and years down the line, writing a new system to manage this problem and deal with this feature, probably a good idea. If it's a bug and you can't quite fix it, do you see if the code wizard can jump in and fix it? Now, it's quick, but it requires they be able to do that. They might not have the capacity to do that. They might be busy on other things. And also that means that no one else is learning from this experience, maybe. Or do you seek to find a workaround and venture down an unknown path that you don't know how long it's going to be? Now, there's no wrong answer in this case. Each one of these is context dependent. If you don't have rope, well, you can't use rope to get across. If you don't have the time to build a bridge, or you don't have heaps of wood with you, that's not going to happen. The wizard might not know how to fly, so you have to seek a workaround. However, it's all dependent on your skills, the capacity you've got. And decisions need context, and that context comes from within your team. Now, if you post on Twitter that you took a particular route, expect that you'll get a barrage of tweets saying, that's wrong, you should have done it this other way. But that's because those people on Twitter don't understand the context behind that decision that you made. They don't realize that, yes, whilst building a bridge would have been great, this is something that you're only ever going to do once, and you're never going to need to do this again. So actually using rope was a fine solution. You've crossed the river and made your way across the field. To your left, you can see a rock formation at the base of a ridge, and you spot a large cave entrance. From inside, you can hear a guttural growl getting louder and louder. The fighter speaks up. Hey, DM, can I take out my warhammer and try hitting the entrance of that cave? I want to see if I can cave it in and stop whatever's in there coming out and eating us. The DM responds with, oh, you can most certainly try to do that. And it might work. The fighter might hit the rock hard enough to cause a cave in and stop the monster from coming out, or it might not, and the team will have to fight the monster anyway. The thing is, this sort of thing doesn't necessarily always become covered by the rule books that we've got. The Dungeon Master's Guide doesn't necessarily have a rule for that particular thing, but improvisation is a key part of Dungeons & Dragons, and improvisation and rule changing is a good way to go through the software development side of things. Now, when I say rules are a good start, then break them, quoting a Spotify article, I'm not saying, industry regulations and, PCI compliance, just break those rules. That doesn't matter. That's not what I'm saying here. What I'm saying is your team rules and your team principles that you've put in place. The things where you said, right, we're going to do this particular thing as a team that's decided it. If it doesn't work for you, or it's not quite appropriate to the solution you're in, see if a different way of doing things works. There's always that chance to bend those rules that you're working within. Rigid systems don't work for people. They're too inflexible, and they don't bend with the ever-changing nature of the world that we live in and the software that we're building. And just because something works for someone else and they've written it down doesn't mean it's going to exactly work for you. However, you need to start with something concrete. You need to start with a set of rules so that everyone's got a common ground to work from. Otherwise, it devolves into chaos. In D&D, a natural 20 is the best roll you can make. It's usually an automatic success on something, and it's kind of down to the hand of fate because it's a dice roll. Now, often when trying new things that we haven't done before, it can feel like this too, and no matter how much you try and control things, sometimes you do roll a natural 20, and sometimes you roll a natural 1, which is the opposite. It's the worst roll you can make. It's an automatic failure. It's not something you can always control, but you can offset the bad consequences of a roll like this by being prepared for them. Sometimes you roll well and sometimes you don't, and that happens. But those things that you don't think you can control, you can prepare for. If the fighter managed to cave in the entrance, great, you've avoided that problem. If they didn't, then you're going to have to face it. But you can be prepared for both scenarios. You don't have to just go, well, I'll just see what happens. You can actually prepare for each of those. Look at it. Okay, what happens if the cave caves in? Cool, we can walk past. If we don't, how do we prepare for that? You can use past experience and previous knowledge to help you do that. The growl in the cave gets louder, and you might only have a short time before it reaches you. The fighter didn't manage to cave in the entrance, and it looks like you're going to have to face whatever's in there. The wizard pipes up. I'd like to see if I can work out what's in that cave, please. Do I recognize the growl? Do I know what type of creature would live in this cave? After making their roll, it's determined that they've got experience to do that. And they know that the troll lives in that cave. They know that the troll has a weakness to fire. And whilst there's these unknowns coming at you, you didn't exactly know what was in that cave, but you could use the experience of saying, have I seen anything like this before? Have I built a feature similar to this? Have I touched on similar parts of the system before? And you can use that to kind of start preparing you for what might be in store. The troll also has a chance of damaging anyone who hits it with acid from its bitter mouth. The wizard, however, keeps this information to themselves. They don't feel the need to share it with anyone else. The troll bursts out of the cave with a mighty roar, and the party immediately engages it. The fighter swings at it with its hammer. The rogue stabs it with its dagger. But the troll is too strong. It looks like it just might get the better of them as acid splashes upon the party. The wizard, however, is standing back. They're studying things from afar. And they say those 3 words that every dungeon master either loves or hates to hear. I cast Fireball. The troll falls to the ground defeated, and the party turns around to thank the wizard for saving them in combat. However, that wizard, be it dungeon-based wizard or code-based wizard, they had knowledge and information that would have been useful to the party, and they kept it to themselves in order to make themselves look better at the end. As a result, the team nearly failed in their quest. Knowledge silos like that are a barrier to effective team performance. If you have knowledge that could be useful to the team, you should share it. You should not keep it to yourself thinking that you're maintaining job security by that. That will only lead to toxicity within the team and your reliance being more and more relied upon, which is actually not good for you. Now, wizards are often the smart-ass know-it-alls with a superiority complex, both in Dungeons & Dragons and code wizards. They want to hoard the knowledge. It's theirs. It doesn't belong to anyone else. But that information works best when it's shared with everyone. Sometimes you might need that wizard to do something that no one else can do. Sometimes you need them to cast Fireball. But those occasions are exceptional and rare, and most of the time it's just better if we share that information. You look up and realize that a large hill stands between you and the castle. Stood at the base, you're not sure if you've got the energy to push on. You'd forgotten that in the final moments, you can often require more effort than the entire rest of the project combined. You're weak and weary, and you've got to push even harder to reach your goal. In D&D, if you push on constantly, you suffer exhaustion. You can no longer perform the duties that you've set out to do as well because you're just too tired. In real life, we have the same thing. And the most important and productive thing you can do in software development is stop, go home, and do something else for a while. Get a good night's sleep. That will yield more improvement than all of your fancy processes, agiles, and death marches. I'm sorry, crunch time. That's a quote from Larry Garfield, and I cannot agree with it anymore. We get to the end of a project and we think, cool, now it's crunch time, and we push and we push and we push and we push, and everyone burns out. The quality of the project goes downhill. Go home and get a night's sleep. How many times have you fought that bug for days and days? All day. I'll just stay a bit later. I'll just stay a bit later. And then you go to bed that night, wake up the next morning, and the problem has immediately come to you. And you think, of course it's that. That time, that rest, that sleep, that ability to give your brain something else to focus on is crucial to problem solving. You've made it to the castle. You approach the room that the crystal lays within, and you see the crystal on a plinth. The rogue steps forward and swipes the crystal from its mount. And then suddenly you hear a faint click. Arrows fire from the wall, and the rogue drops to their knees. The crystal rolls from their hand and comes to rest at the cleric's feet. In the excitement of reaching your goal, you've realized the most important rule of all: always check for traps. It's not over when that piece of software is deployed to production. You can't just push it to the server and then ignore it and go, you know what, I'm done, and go home. It's monitoring. It's logging. It's making sure that you've got enough information so that when the product is out there, you're not just ignoring it. It's not over until that thing has been in production for years. And even then, it's probably not still over. Let's face it. You've got to keep on top of these things. Just because you've completed the task doesn't mean that your job is done. The cleric holds their holy symbol, and the light of their deity blesses them. They heal the rogue's wounds, and the rogue stands to their feet. The party make a journey back to their tavern. It's quiet in comparison to the one here, and they've learned from their mistakes along the way. They've seen the path they've been down. They've seen the paths that they shouldn't have gone down. As they walk into the distance, they surely won't make those mistakes next time, will they? Once you've completed your task, it's good to take time to reflect. When you're you've got the thing deployed to production and the monitoring and the logging is there and there's no errors coming through and you're confident that, you know what, this is working as good as we can hope. Take time to reflect. Take time to talk with each other about what did we do well? What didn't go so well? How can we improve this so that next time when we fight that troll, the wizard isn't the one saving us whilst everyone else falls to their knees? What could make the next adventure, what could make the next feature we build easier? Is that a process change? Is that a tooling change? Is that a people change? You know, someone doing a slightly different role, helping with something? What can you do? Through all of this, you need to look for balance in your team, in skills, in alignment, in background, in thinking. Check in regularly. Keep everyone on the right path so that no one veers away, and ends up in a completely different place. Make sure everyone's working towards the same goal. You always have choices. And start with those rules. Then break them as appropriate for your particular team. What works for you? Don't just say, well, because they do it and it works for them, it must work for us. Use past experience to help you with the unknowns in your software journey. You might not have done this exact thing before, but what have you done that's similar? Have you seen a conference talk in the past that covered that particular topic? And you go, you know what, I can go and get something from that. Some wizards can have their place sometimes, but that's very, very rare. The wizards have their place when they share and everyone around them is also sharing and making sure that the team dynamic is varied. And don't be sloppy even to the end of your task. Just because the code is on production doesn't mean it's working. Always check for traps. Thank you very much.